Welcome to Talks with Petri show. I'm your host Petri, and today's guest is serial entrepreneur, Skype and Starship Technologies co-founder Ahti Heinla. Welcome.
Hello everybody, and then hi Petri, thank you for having me here.
Let's talk first about Starship. How do you escalate a curiosity project into an 8 years old startup with 200 million raised funds?
The answer is step by step, because definitely it didn't happen all in one go. But step by step, you can grow anything. You can do anything really. Like if you start from just an idea, like 8 years ago, this was just an idea. This was me and my co-founder Janus Friis. We were
sorry to pause you even before that, because just for the curiosity, what I actually learned, it started even earlier. You had a family life and you were busy and you needed some distraction or some curiosity. Can you just quickly walk through the real start of the thing and then it became an expensive hobby?
Go back also to the time when I was born, but that was
we can go there later.
Get to that later. But essentially, I had been a pure software person. My parents were computer programmers. My mother taught me how to program computers when I was 10 years old. I was the chief technical architect at Skype, but Skype was purely software, right? And then at some point, I became a father. My daughter was born, and then it was kind of difficult, the first year of the baby's life and so forth. And I thought I couldn't really do like a startup at the same time. But I thought I could have like a technical hobby. I need to do something on the side. I can't just stay home and be with the baby. It would probably make me crazy. I would need to do something else. So I could build robots. So I started building robots for hobby and for competition, and then turned that into a business later.
By the way, Estonia is quite big with robots. Is it the biggest event organizer or the event still, because maybe that was what got your attention at the time?
Yes. So Estonia has this robotics competition or robotics festival called Robotex, which is the biggest robotics competition in the world, where it's about 1,000 teams competing with the robots in various competitions. And yes, like one of the first things that I really did actually with robotics was actually I went to compete on Robotex, and I thought that typically in Robotex it's like student teams and high school and so forth and so forth. I was like experienced technologist and so forth. I thought, okay, I'm going to win this. Especially I looked at the last year competition videos and I thought, okay, I mean, I could do better. I could do better than that. Then I assembled a team with some really experienced professional friends, and we didn't win. We hardly got past the qualification round.
What?
So I learned also that robotics is hard. It's harder than you think. But I learned through this process, and next year we got actually third place, so it was a little bit better. And then I went on to do a NASA robotics competition, NASA Centennial Challenge, which is like a bigger thing, which is a little bit like this X Prize type of thing, a little bit smaller scale. It's only 1.5 million prize purse, but still, definitely bigger event. And that was also a big learning experience. We really tried to do this really professionally with about 10 people team, and we were like, I funded the team and I led the team myself. By that time, my daughter was also a little bit older, so I could spend more time doing these sorts of things. We still didn't win, and we did that for 2 years. So at that point, then I kind of decided, okay, maybe actually let's turn this into a business. It's enough doing this for like 3 years as a hobby. Let's try to turn this into a business.
So if I understood correctly, you were flying back from the competition and you stopped by in London and you was just visiting your friend Janus Friis from Skype times. And can you walk through the process? Because this is something I think every founder is going through, that first you have like a vague idea and it's like, okay, I don't know whether I should do this or not. And okay, this is starting to get a bit serious now. And then you realize that, there's a point where like, you need to solidify it, okay, let's do this and jump off the cliff. So can you walk through that process? Because, it's like you said, it's not obvious. And you have stated elsewhere that, you never wanted to be an entrepreneur, and here we are.
Right, and actually it was more complicated than you describe it right now. It wasn't that I was flying back from the NASA competition and then stopped by in London with Jaanus. It was more complicated. These were actually two parallel processes. So with the robotics, initially I didn't want to turn this into a business. Initially, actually some of my team in the competition was telling me that, Ahti, your experience in startup, let's make this a startup. And I was telling people that no, let's not do that, because what we're doing here with the competition is pure fun. We're doing it just for fun. If we lose or win in the competition, in the end it doesn't matter really. If we turn this into a business, it's going to be a different story. It's going to be much harder. It's not going to be just for fun, and we can't just quit any time. With the competition, it's like, okay, if you're preparing for the competition for 6 months and 3 months in, you decide you're not going to do that competition. Actually, maybe like, anything for any reason, you decide you're not going to do that. You can just decide so. You can just decide, okay, we're going to withdraw, and that's it. No problem. With a company, it's not like that yet. The 3 years in, you just decide, oh yeah, it's too boring for me. I just stop it. You can't do it like that. It's essentially, with the founding a startup and growing a startup, you immediately have commitment. You commit to your co-founders, but that's the easy part, because it's only a small number of people. But you also commit to your employees, you commit to your investors, you commit to the public, to your customers, and so forth. And you can't just quit. If you decide that, I'm going to do something else, essentially. So that's why I initially didn't want to do this. And I had actually a parallel process going on with Jaanus about, doing a startup together. And we were experimenting with various ideas. There was actually one idea which was completely different, not with anything with robotics at all, which was pure software, which we were doing, but didn't work out. Then we said, okay, what are we going to do next? Then we had the brainstorm. We still had this overall setting that, we were both at Skype, and we decided to work together. We decided to do another startup together. So we wanted to do something that was potentially bigger than Skype, or something that could be really big. And the idea of robotics came up that, okay, maybe we should actually still do something with robotics. But then also the question was, there's so many robots out there being built, but most of them do not really seem like, big commercial opportunities. Most of them seem to be like, for fun or academic or, a little bit like that. Not something that could be a really big business or bigger than Skype. Skype touched, well, everybody's lives would be a little bit of an exaggeration, but still it could touch on the lives of many, many, many people. But we did Skype, then, loads of people, later, wrote to us that, how their whatever long distance marriage was saved by Skype, and, about, loads of stories like that. How can we do the same with robotics?
Just to pause a bit, to give the magnitude for those people who actually maybe never used Skype, because they're just a bit younger generation, so it's in the same category like the rotary phone. So TikTok, I think the Western world is now like 700 plus million monthly active users, and Skype, when Microsoft bought it, was pretty much the same. 700 million users, so 10 years difference, and the smartphones were not exactly there yet in the level, so that gives the magnitude of the thing Skype was at the time.
Right. Essentially, Skype was a long time ago. So a lot of people nowadays, don't know what Skype really was. I think, or what the magnitude was. But Skype was one of the biggest success stories out of Europe, essentially, in terms of consumer technology, startups. Like, it was it was something that grew very quickly, grew very very big, and it was kind of mostly founded, developed in the Nordics essentially. Estonia, then UK also, and but it was mostly developed in Europe. It was used all around the world, and was pretty big in Asia. Asia was actually our biggest user base, but developed in Europe. And you don't get that too often. Most of these world dominating startups and consumer products, they are built in somewhere else, not Europe. But this was one of the original big success stories out of Europe. But it was a long time ago. Many people don't remember that anymore.
Yeah, the Skype has changed also over the years. We can go back to the Skype a bit later, but going back that you were saying that you did Skype together with a few other founders, and now you're like, let's put the bar a little bit higher.
Exactly, it's a natural thing to do, right? And if you have had some great success, then the next time you're trying to do something, you are aiming for something that could potentially be bigger. You can never guarantee to be bigger, because like one thing also that you should know, maybe about me and about startups that I have done. Maybe most people know only about Skype and Starship, but actually I've started a number of other things that nobody knows about. And nobody knows about because they never got past, like hiring 5 people, and then we decided, okay, it's not working out. And at that scale, you can actually just decide that, okay, the founders want to do something else, and let's just, shut this down. That's possible. When you have 100 people, it becomes much, much, much harder to do that. So I would say I've had actually quite a lot of experience in these very early days where starting things where there's just a couple of people, and do that for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and then decide that it's not working out. I've actually had a lot of that.
Sounds like a few of the Finnish success stories as well, like Angry Birds. I think was it the +50 game, which actually worked, and that's everyone knows. But those 50 first ones were not exactly the hits, and then the same thing with Supercell, another even bigger success story in the gaming world, where they're actually testing a lot of these new ideas, and teams are committed, building for a long time, and then they just scrap it, and it's like, okay, this is not good enough to our high quality standards. So and it's not a failure. It's just like, hey, we tried and it didn't work out.
Right, absolutely. It's very much this story that you often, especially in the media, you have stories like, okay, it's something was an overnight success, and it almost never actually was an overnight success. It was 10 years of hard work, experimentation, failures, some early successes, but nobody noticed. Then failures again, then some a little bit bigger early successes, and then you hit it big. You can't predict, what like I said, I did in between Skype and Starship, I started a number of other things. And,
can you do you have a rough estimate, even, in the ideas, that how many, it doesn't need to be like you did it for 2 years, but,
I think I started in terms of commercial, startup ideas that I started or co-started was about 5 that nobody knows about. Right. Yeah. Or 5 or 4. I think one of them actually became a little bit successful, but where I was like a little bit of an early co-founder, but I was like a very early co-founder, and actually decided I'm not going to do that anymore. So
So was it the Target API or?
No. That was actually
because that's the one you actually have in your LinkedIn, and you don't have many things in LinkedIn, so that's probably special in that sense.
Right. I haven't listed all of these early experimentation projects, in LinkedIn, but I was actually doing. I was actually an early co-founder in an e-commerce startup in India, where I was actually going to move to India and do this full time and so forth. And then I actually realized, I actually going back to the story about becoming a father, and I was actually thinking that I could do a startup, raise or have a kid, and move to a different country all at the same time. and I realized very quickly I can only do one of these things at the time. So that was raising the kid.
And for the audience, Ahti has a great website still up called Blue Moon. I can put it in the show notes, and you can see his travels as well there. And I guess it was. Did you find the founders and the idea while you were traveling in India, or was somebody contacting you? Or how do you come up with these ideas?
No. It was a colleague at Skype who was from India and wanted to move back and do this. But definitely it helped that actually I had traveled to India. I've actually been to India 10 times. So traveled quite a lot in this part of the world. It kind of helped to actually set the seed or understand a little bit that what this country is about, and it's very different from around here.
So basically, if you go back a little bit to the Starship, so okay, now the team is like, Ahti, you need to do something. We need to make this a serious business now, and let's not have fun anymore. Let's have some commercial success, and all the bets are off in a sense that now you have to do it and jump off the cliff. What happens then, and how do you do a hardware startup, which is hardware is hard, and I guess you can agree, and everyone who has actually done any hardware stuff, it's really hard. So what are the metrics? How do you build a successful hardware company from the start?
Yeah, it's difficult for sure. Yes, hardware is hard. Robotics is hard for sure. But I would also say actually building any startup is hard. Software or hardware. People focus on the successes, but typically internally it's a fight every day, and lots of also really successful startups have had tough spots, have had really tough times. So the founders all kind of on the stage smile, and everybody looks at them and say, oh, these guys, it's so easy for them, or they have enjoyed this great level of success. Yes, that is, sometimes people have just a lot of luck, yes, but you also have a lot of bad luck, and you also have a lot of challenges that you're going through that you don't talk about on the stage. So that is absolutely clear, and all of the very successful startup founders also that I know, they have gone through some rough times. So regardless of whether it is hardware or software or anything else, but hardware definitely. One thing actually, since we had the success of Skype behind us, and we were both high net worth individuals, one kind of decision we did at the start is that we are going to fund it ourselves. Now we have raised hundreds of millions, also from outside. But initially, we only started this because we knew we could fund this initially ourselves. Because we understood this is going to be a long-term game. This is going to be something that needs investing in before it really starts to work. And specifically, I think things are actually easier done if you are if you have a little bit of a background of how to spin things in the public, or how to create like a little bit of a show or story out of this. But I'm not really like that. I'm actually okay. What is actual business essence? Why are we doing this? And let's make this work. I never wanted to create like just a story. I wanted to create a working business. And working business with robotics requires scale, and requires things like, okay, why are people using our service? So if people are not using a robot just because it's a gimmick or it's a nice thing, or it's just we wanted to actually this deliver robot to provide utility, and one of the pieces of utility is actually that it could lower the cost of delivery, and we figured out that delivery is a big problem economically. Generally, people are not willing to pay for delivery. If you get your next food order and you see that I had delivery fee 150 and I got the 50% discount, so I was paying less than €1. for the delivery, like if you do the math, you realize that somebody must be paying the difference. The delivery really last mile delivery costs way more than euro 50, way more. And that's the problem. Customers are not willing to pay for what it actually takes. Right now, or until recently, venture capitalists were willing to pay for it. So venture capitalists was paying for delivery, and they're not going to do that forever. So that's the problem we wanted to solve. We wanted to make delivery lower cost. So when you asked, okay, we had this brainstorm in London. So what did we do next? My next thing I did was create a back of the napkin calculation. And the back of the napkin calculation was about unit economics. It was about how low can we go in terms of the costs. How much can robots lower the cost? Since this back of the napkin calculation worked out, that was a big milestone for me. That was that, okay, maybe we can, really do this.
So let me pause here because I think this is really important lesson. So you actually didn't start from the technology, having all the background of already going to the competition. It was more like, okay, how much are the consumers willing to pay for this thing? Can we actually make it to work? Does it actually have like some kind of a substance in a way that, yeah, probably it doesn't work now, but we can actually engineer it out and at the end it will work out?
Right. My thought process essentially was, I'm a sort of a fairly universal technologist in that, by that time I had background from both, hardware and software, and I could just, in a very sort of shooting from the hip way, approximately, assess how long does it take to develop this thing, how much the robot would cost to manufacture. Some of the other, parameters around that, I could just shooting from the hip in a very sort of approximate way, I could assess, how would that work. So I knew that approximately that's how it's going to be, because in the NASA competition we were actually building robots which, they were actually robots not designed to do delivery, but designed to pick up rocks on Mars. But if you think of it, actually, a robot picking up rocks on the Mars is actually the relatively similar size of a sidewalk delivery robot, and relatively similar speed. And we use actually some of the relatively similar sensors. So some of the technical background I actually had, I knew almost exactly how much it would, cost, what sensors we would need to use, and so forth. What I didn't know was that, would that actually work as a business? Because there's no point in starting to just go deep into technology, starting to really build this beyond just shooting from the hip, but starting to really build this, if you actually have this big unknown, which is, will this work commercially? So we needed to validate that. So we actually, we had a friend of mine who is actually really good at that, Alan Martinson, who was actually helping us to validate validate the commercials essentially, and the output of that was actually that, it's actually a really good idea commercially to do this.
And just to also remind the audience as well that you started 2014, obviously a bit earlier, but that's the time. So Volt and Bolt and all these food deliveries were just about to get started, or they were in the really early years. So it wasn't like a proven model it is now. And the world really looked different at the time, so it wasn't clear that it becomes like a major trend. And I guess it was really the COVID times which sort of hit it home that it's so convenient and it works. And so you started like really in a different era, I would say.
Well, yes and no. Yes, definitely these food delivery startups that exist today, they were in very early stages. That's true. On the other hand, people had things delivered all the time. I mean, FedEx, UPS, these things existed for sure. You could also get pizza delivered all the time. That's an industry that has existed for a very long time. So it wasn't that there was like we didn't know whether delivery as such is something that people want. We knew that was for sure, and we knew also from the start that the robot that we are going to be building, it could transport packages, it could transport pizzas, it could transport flowers, it could transport, medicine, it could transport anything else. And we actually segmented the market and, and tried to put some numbers on it. Like, okay, what what are we going to deliver? And we quickly found out, for example, flower delivery is actually a very small business. Pizza delivery is way bigger business, for example, and so forth and so forth. And we understood, but that all came a little bit later. We understood that our robots would be agnostic in terms of the technology would be agnostic in terms of what it would actually deliver. Regardless of the food delivery startups, we would have some business.
Is it a secret how much you actually put your own money before you did the seed round, which was like 17 million or something? That was the official round for the other people joining the project. So you did actually the whole testing phase and the first phase just by the founders. So how serious you were in this sense?
Yeah, so initially on the sort of the first meetings, we kind of decided that, okay, we're going to be putting in 2 million. Obviously, in the end, we raised much more money and so forth and so forth. So 2 million maybe was way too small for starters. But if you are just two people, then you don't have that many expenses initially. So this 2 million actually lasted us for like I think longer than a year. So it was definitely a required step, and I can't overemphasize this, that if we didn't have this sort of 2 million to invest into it ourselves, we would likely not have done it. We would likely not even bother to go to VCs to raise money for this, because we didn't know what to pitch even. We didn't, these were so early days that we thought that there's something in there. There's something in there, and one other thing, maybe a little bit of an insight, that many people do not realize. Back then, of course, delivery was done, usually with cars, right? And the idea of having a much smaller robot to do delivery was a little bit maybe of a new thing, but we realized also that things are delivered with the car because the cars need to fit people. It's not that the car needs to fit the package that you need to deliver. The package is small. Usually it's very small, right? And you can actually build a very small robot that goes even really fast. It can go actually car speed. Our robot's not designed to do car speed, but for example, do you know what is the speed record for like the small model RC cars, or actually not even RC, but competition cars, which are like this size or something like that? What's the speed record? Like the actual competitions, for that.
Are they electric or are they? It doesn't matter.
No, at least at that time, I'm sure that nowadays probably these competitions are done electric, but back then it was actually internal combustion engine.
Well, I had those when I was a child, and they went like 50 kilometers per hour, 40, I think some of them. So it must be like a double or triple of that.
Yeah. So at the time we started Starship, the world champion was an Estonian, and the world record was about 330 kilometers per hour.
So it's like flying, basically.
Exactly. And this is like this size, like a really small thing, right? And so you could actually build a robot which is very small and goes on the road with the same speed as the cars and can deliver packages. The problem is it will be crushed by the cars. That's the problem. Then we decided, okay, but we can do this on the sidewalk with much smaller.
Did you ever consider actually drones, like you could fly, because that's somewhat easier in some sense and harder in the other?
So actually drones were considered by other people at the time. Amazon had just published their idea of doing drone delivery, but one of the sort of counterpoint. We actually started Starship as a little bit of a counterpoint to that. We realized that okay, drones actually have problems. People don't like drones. One famous saying is that people would love to get drone delivery, but they would hate it when their neighbor does so. And if you live in a residential neighborhood, you have lots of neighbors. If people were all the time getting drone delivery, there would be just this sort of buzzing, and this people don't like flying things up in the air which are buzzing.
All right. So, anything you want to share with the journey? I don't think we will go all the details on what happened. There's an excellent website you have, and there's a lot of milestones. And actually, one peculiar thing I was just looking at, is it now 4 million deliveries this year was the latest?
Yeah, we just exceeded 4 million deliveries with our robots and 8 million kilometers driven. So we're driving as much kilometers as the self-driving car companies are doing, but with a much slower robot, right? And our mileage, our kilometers are commercial volume. It's not like testing, like most of the self-driving car kilometers are done. So we are essentially a world leader in autonomous technology now. And that wasn't where we started in 2014, but we built this into the world leader in autonomous driving, essentially. And we have proven that the robot delivery does work. Obviously, 4 million deliveries, our sites are much higher than that, right? But 4 million also proves that, this is not just a gimmick. This is not something that this is just one robot driving around or something like that. We have thousands of robots doing deliveries every day.
I was actually, because you mentioned these milestones, and I was like, okay, is there like exponential curve going, like going backwards, like November, this month, November 2020, 4 million hit, February this year, 3 million, then October 21, 2 million, so that was basically doubling. But then the previous doubling was last year from October 21 to January 21. That was 1 million. So it's like, are we starting to hit like really like going up in a sense? And where do you see this going in 5 years? So
it is exponential for sure. I think for the first 4 years. For the first 4 years of the life of Starship, I think we did maybe about 20,000 deliveries or so. Now we are at 4 million. It's definitely accelerating, and it makes total sense. Why it's accelerating. Of course, in the early days we were just building robotics technology. That was all what Starship was about, making sure that the robot could drive autonomously on the sidewalk, and whether it's safe enough to do so, and everything around it. And then it was more about expanding the commercials, also the manufacturing of the robots, all of the commercial partnerships, what do the stores need from us, how does the delivery work from the consumer perspective, and so forth, and then we could really start scaling this up, and we are accelerating for sure.
How do you balance the R&D side of things, which always needs to be improved, and you could always do more, but you have to also deliver, and then the commercial side, because you mentioned that you are commercially successful, and you were pretty early also in that sense. So how do you make that to happen? Because it's not obvious.
Right. So I think in some companies there is a sort of a bigger separation between the R&D and everyday commercial operation. In our case, it's not like that. In our case, actually, the company and engineering is very much integrated into the operations. These are of course, there are two different departments of the company. Yes, that is true. But the overall company is not that, the R&D lives in its own world, and then the commercial operations lives in its own world. We do, continuous integration all the time. Like for example, the robot software we are releasing, I think about 3 times a week. If for example, an autonomous driving software engineer writes a line of code and commits this, then it gets to the live robots, to all of our robots, in about 7 days or 10 days. There's like a testing cadence and so forth in between, and automatic tests and live tests and so forth. But it's about 7 or 10 days generally. And when they mess up, when they make a mistake, they're messing up the commercial operation, right? So that's why the feedback loop there is also very tight, and everybody reviews the commercial results all the time. It's not that the R&D engineers do not care about how our business are doing. No, they care about it very much. And also we have a big weekly engineering meeting, which is very much sort of R&D oriented, which also our the operations leaders attend and so forth, and they listen to the engineers banter about, how some screw got loose, or, how they had some bug, or how they had, something else. So actually the R&D and the commercial operations are actually very integrated. And that's a good thing, obviously, because it gets everybody aligned. It's also a hard thing to do because it creates a lot of stress. It creates a lot of stress essentially because R&D is a little bit unpredictable. The commercial operation needs obviously predictability and stability and reliability from technology. On the other hand, it also works the other way around, in that business development and business partnerships are also unpredictable. You can't predict that when are you going to get the signature from a partner, or when are you're going to launch this other thing. Even though sometimes, commercial people are saying that, oh, we're going to launch this, next week, and then the R&D engineers are kind of developing for that a little bit, and then it turns out that, oh, it actually gets launched 3 days earlier, and then R&D engineers are not ready, and everybody's pissed, and it creates a lot of stress. This integration creates a lot of stress in the company. But we have still chosen to go this full integration way and not have these vertical silos all that much.
What type of culture you're building in the company? Because there's already hundreds of people already in the company. It was not just you and a few other founders doing everything. So what's the process for there? Because it's completely different to have a company with maybe 10 people or tens of people than hundreds of people, and still have the initiatives and the drive and those things which actually makes it successful. So how do you make sure that will happen as well in the future?
Right. Yeah. And actually, this integration that I mentioned earlier, that is actually, I would say, very much, part of the culture. Very much, part of the culture. That people take ownership of the end results, and they do not just think that, oh, my team's work is done, and or my team did a good job on this project. No, what's important for everybody is that the whole project was a success, not that your team did a good job on this project. And that is the culture in the company. And also when I said that, Starship is one of the leading autonomous driving companies in the world, that is actually this sort of integration is also in robotics development, sometimes also an issue between the software teams and the hardware teams. They work on different timelines. The hardware teams move at the slower timeline, obviously because of manufacturing schedules, and software moves faster. But on the other hand, the software people, typically in autonomous driving, the software people require a certain hardware. They require certain hardware improvements in order to deliver on whatever reliability, quality, autonomy levels, whatever efficiency metrics that they need to deliver on. And in a lot of autonomous driving companies, these are actually somewhat separate in the sense that actually the autonomous driving software developers or software researchers, algorithm researchers, they essentially say that, hey, we require, a LiDAR with this sort of spec, or we require cameras with this sort of spec, and they don't exist right now, or they're not mounted on the robot. So there's like a timeline. Oh, next year we are going to get this. All right, and then people start developing this software in simulation for these sensors that have not yet arrived, and then invariably these sensors get delayed. They don't appear, next whatever year, and then everything messes up essentially. Then all the timelines get messed up and so forth. We haven't actually done it this way. We have also gone like full integration between these teams in the way that nobody can just say that, hey, I am just relying on some other team delivering on this 1 year from now. No, everybody's developing with what they have today, and their job is to deliver a good result in commercial operations 1 week from now or 1 month from now. If you are a software team, if you're a hardware team, it's a longer timeline. Then you're maybe expected to deliver, in 3 months or something like that in commercial operations, or maybe 6 months, depending on the thing. But still, you can never just say that, hey, my team's job is done. I wrote the software for this non-existent sensor. my job is done, I should get the bonus or something like that. No, you get the bonus when it's actually working on commercial operations, including having the sensor. And I think that culture has actually helped making Starship leader in the autonomous driving space, because that's actually what gets you the quickest practical results. But it does build in a lot of stress in the company as well, a lot of tension. People are not happy about their team. The results, did not end up good, not because of my team, but because of some other team. So people are suffering because of that. But also I think we have built in Starship a culture where I think a lot of the people in the company, they have this sort of right mindset that they don't point fingers, they don't do this thing. And we have this, one of our company values is we work as one team. And that is a mantra that is repeated throughout the company.
What are the metrics you're following in a sense that you know that the company is going the right direction? Because in the startup world, there's a lot of vanity metrics, but there's some things which are really essential. And obviously, the further you go with the company, you get a sort of sense what actually makes sense and how you can see that everything is going the right direction. And because usually you get what you measure.
The number of deliveries, revenue, profitability, and then in the engineering sense, also some of the ingredients of all of these things. That how many things went wrong yesterday. So we drive 10-20,000 kilometers every day, right? And to put that into perspective, during the first year of our operation, we drove 1,000 kilometers during the first year, right? Now we're doing, 10K, 20K a day. So definitely mishaps happen. Things happen, wrong every day. During 20,000 kilometers, there were a number of things that were suboptimal. These get reviewed. And how serious of these things happened, yesterday or the last week or whatever it is. And these are the metrics that we're following all the time, and there's loads of efficiency metrics in technology, because if you say that, okay, we're driving down the cost of delivery, this cost is largely technological for us. If you're operating a human delivery network, this cost is mainly the what you pay to the courier, and that's you cannot optimize that 3x smaller next year or something like that. It's kind of not completely fixed, but it's near fixed essentially. In our case, the costs, even though we do have people in our operation, but technology determines how often our people needed, how often robots need maintenance, for example, and so forth. So we can optimize the maintenance cost of the robot down by 3x if we want to, right? So there's loads of technology metrics like that about reliability and various things like that determine our costs. So these are the main metrics that the R&D team is using. And there have been actually various phases in the life of the company. These metrics have changed over time. When we started out, and when we were during the first 4 years, approximately, then we were focused on mostly building the robotics technology. And one of the key milestones there was in 2017, where we became the first company in the world to regularly drive robots in public spaces without any human supervision. Because self-driving cars, Waymo was also driving their cars before in public spaces, right? But always with a safety driver in the car. And we also had before 2017, we also had people following robots.
I remember even in Tallinn you could see that was like a regular thing, that there was a person following and has some kind of a controller as well.
Exactly, and we did a lot of kilometers like that. Obviously, this is not efficient in any sort of commercial operation at all, right? Obviously, we knew that we needed to develop the robots to the point where it's safe enough to drive without any human supervision. Then we went to remote supervision, right? But also we knew we needed to get rid of that as well. And in order to get there,
is that, by the way, the level 4 and level 5 is fully autonomous if it, taking the jargon from the cars as well?
Right. But in order to get there, in order to drive without this human supervision, we also had a metric. we had a metric how often, certain types of abnormalities, happen that would then maybe require, some human assistance. And when we first started to measure the metric, then it was that, oh gosh, we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go. Like this was actually one of the sort of the relatively bleak moments, I would say, that the metric was bad. And that was, I think, 2015 or so.
Pretty early in the...
Yeah, and we thought that, okay, but to what level do we need to drive this metric? And we figured that, okay, we need to improve or change the metric 250 times. 250 times we need to improve before we can remove people, following robots. So, like one venture capitalist approximately at that time, told me in a tier 1 firm that, you can improve a metric 10x, but you can't plan to improve a metric 100x. Like 10x you could do, but 100x you cannot plan for, I'm not going to be funding this, essentially. What we did was that I was the CEO of the company. We had a weekly meeting every Thursday. We still have the weekly meeting every Thursday. And I stood in front of the company every Thursday and I reported on that metric. What has the metric been now? And we obviously this was the major focus in the company, to improve that metric. And it took 2.5 years. 2.5 years of me reporting it every week. Sometimes it went better. Sometimes it also went worse. This was measured in real life, not in some sort of simulation. And we drove it down 250 times in 2.5 years. So that was then the point where we could remove the people from following robots. And we actually kept the same target. We actually didn't change the target. If I'm honest, the target was kind of set, really like, oh, okay, what would it be? Approximated like that. We had actually no idea how much irregularities could we tolerate, but then we settled on a certain sort of level, and it was actually approximately the right level. So that was a major phase in developing the company. These 2.5 years, where it was all about this one number. At that time, we didn't have commercial operations yet, so it wasn't about profitability. It wasn't about how much revenue we were making. It was about this one number. This one number still exists. We're still measuring it right now, but it's good enough. So it does receive some focus from the R&D teams to improve that number further, but it's not a major focus anymore.
Are you planning to have some other crazy numbers now, like that? Bigger than Skype. How do you define, that you are actually in the leading? Is it like 2 billion people are using it daily, or is there some crazy vision, where you said, okay, this is probably now in the level that I can somewhat, be happy what we be doing?
Yeah, you can always have ambition levels, of course, and it's always something that you can improve on. So if you look at right now, Starship right now, and some people say that, oh, Starship is so successful startup, Starship has made it. Yeah, in a way, Starship has made it, but on the other hand, also the 4 million deliveries that we have done, it's a very small part of all total deliveries that are done in the world. We have a long way to go in order to actually dominate the world. But the thing about this also is, robotic deliveries will win. For sure. Like if you think of it, just, first principles, you can make robotic deliveries lower cost than human. Delivery has this economic problem that we talked about earlier, that consumers are not really willing to pay the real cost of the delivery. Robotics is the only solution there, and we are going to win. And this 4 million is going to sound very, 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 very small 1 year from now or 2 years from now.
Can you give some idea, if it's company confidential, obviously not, but something like 5 to 10 years, where are we? What's the regular world? How many deliveries, numbers, and how will world change in that sense? It can be also some other companies also that if you describe
There
the
w-
world?
There will be more deliveries for sure in 5 or 10 years. I mean, it's just obvious. The only thing that is limiting this is really is essentially economics and the availability of couriers, because there is a bit of an economic game there that if you would pay couriers more, you could have more couriers, so you could do more deliveries. But people don't want to pay more to couriers. They want to pay less to couriers to make the economics work, so that the consumers could pay for delivery, not the venture capitalists, because venture capitalists are not willing to do that too much anymore, or they're not willing to do that forever. But on the other hand, like the equation doesn't work essentially. So, but I think there will be more deliveries for sure. Even with people, there will be more deliveries in 5 or 10 years than there are right now. But there will be also a big number of deliveries in 5 or 10 years that will be done with robots. Much more than 4 million. Starship is a leading company in that space, by a long shot. Like if you think, what our closest competitors are, how many deliveries they have done. It's maybe tens of thousands or 100,000 or so. It's not in the millions.
In the history of the company, you have been the CEO and you have stepped down, and initially neither of the founders wanted to be a CEO. So can you elaborate a bit about that? As a founder, you want to build a company, you necessarily don't want to be the CEO or running things, because that's a different job. So what is your advice, and what do you have learned, of doing this, hiring also CEOs? Was it six times?
My advice in general is don't do it the way I did it.
Okay.
Generally, because Starship was founded in a way where neither of the founders wanted to be the CEO, and I was the CEO only because essentially we thought that, okay, in the beginning we need to do mainly technology development, and then maybe the CTO is almost the same thing as the CEO. Of course, I was wrong. We started to do way more than just technology development. Also quite early on, because we needed to validate the market and get commercial partnerships and so forth and so forth. So essentially, we realized that, okay, in this situation, eventually we will need to hire a CEO. The problem is hiring a CEO is actually really hard. I've hired as a founder or as a board member. I've hired 6 CEOs in my life. Very few of them work out. So it is tough. It is tough. That there are some successes, but there are also failures essentially, and for various reasons. It could be dynamic between the founders and the CEOs. It could be that the CEO has a wrong or different motivation, because on one hand it's just easy to say that, hey, I'll go and lead this company and spend other people's money and so forth, without really being the founder and really responsible for the whole thing. So some people have this sort of attitude and could be CEOs, and maybe this then doesn't work out. But then there are also people with good attitude and that are good hired CEOs, but they're rare. And the process of getting that is just rare. Like if you look at one thing that I did also early on at that time approximately is I looked at in Europe, for example, what I got a list of all of the funding rounds that startups have done, which all of the startups that have raised more than like 50 million or so, and I had essentially a name beside all of these rounds that who was the CEO at the time. And I went through the names of the CEOs in the companies, and there's like 90% of them were founder CEOs. 90%. That a little bit tells you what's the success rate of hiring a great CEO as a non-founder. It's really hard, but we had the situation that we have. Like, it was a fact that we wanted to found this company. It was a fact that we saw that we could pull this off, and neither of us was really like like a full CEO material. So I actually, for most of the history of Starship, I have been the CEO in terms of the years. But it's not actually, I would say, it's not my forte. It's not actually something that I want to do or I'm the best in doing.
What is the job of a CEO?
Mm-hmm. The job
It's
of
not a
the
trick
CEO.
question. It's just like that. How do you define that? Fred Wilson has a really good one, but maybe I can tell it later on. But just curious,
This is like defining what is love.
Everybody has their different definition, I guess.
It's hard to define. I think one sort of like a very sort of clinical way to define it. Define it is that the CEO is the bridge between the outside of the company and the inside of the company. It needs to explain to the company what's going on outside and how they need to adapt and do something differently and what they need to do in order to deliver something on the outside. And they need to explain the outside, like the media, the customers, investors, what the company is doing and why this is such a great company. But I think this is actually a very clinical definition. This is not. It's true. This definition is true. But I'm not sure whether that definition is useful or is helping anyone really. I would say the CEO is just, it's very hard work, very hard job, being the number one person or being the only person that everybody looks up to and that could stand up to very high standards and that has nobody to talk to. The founders and CEOs are in that sense, kind of, in similar position.
Do you go for qualities of the people? Because what I've noticed that entrepreneurs, there's no good way to say this, but maybe they care more. It's usually they are passionate about the vision and they want to make it to happen. So if you hire somebody outside and they haven't been from the beginning, it's hard to get the same type of commitment and level and also the understanding of the issue. So it's even some way it's not even fair to compare that you have a excellent technical capabilities and experience and you take a CEO who doesn't have that background and hasn't gone through that journey, so they cannot even do it in that level. But in some sense it gives you the advantage which makes you also an excellent CEO. In some sense, because you have that inherent. So
right. I agree. But I think Google CEOs, also good hired CEOs, definitely do take this ownership. They do, get bought into this. Essentially, they do, get emotionally involved, and over time, like they do get passionate about it, even though they were not there in the beginning. I think it's not a problem with good hired CEOs. The problem is finding the good hired CEO. It's not. I'm not saying the hired CEO can never work. No, it does work for Starship. Yeah, it does. It's just hard to get to that situation. It takes a long time of searching and long time of vetting people and so forth.
How do you hire when you are in the early stages and the company is growing and you're looking that, okay, maybe we double in the size of the company in some metrics and even higher growth, and you have to now get the external person to lead the thing. And what's the level of, because the compensation comes in if you don't have too much money in the early stages as well. So how do you match that sort of impossible formula that what is a good fit now? Because it's maybe, in 3 years, 5 years, it's completely different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think doing a startup is about matching the impossible things, not just the CEO, but everything else as well. Your customers want the product that it doesn't exist yet, and there's loads of impossible things you have to match. And creativity or not actually creativity, but resourcefulness in solving these things is, I think, the most important attribute of a founder. Resourcefulness. There's loads of things that are seemingly impossible, but you kind of find the way how to make it work.
You mentioned somewhere that I was doing the research of reading that well, you didn't want to be like a leader, but you just found out that you're really good with this thing, and people are like almost like nominating you as a inherent leader. So what are the qualities? What does it take to become a good leader? Can you learn it?
Right. So I still don't think I'm very good at this actually. And I think I
And
wouldn't
that's
actually.
probably a sign that you actually are. Not
Maybe.
stating it in that sense, because yeah.
Maybe, and I certainly, but I certainly also wouldn't say that I started doing this and found that I'm really good at this. Definitely not. I started doing this and found that I'm really bad at it, and then I found that I'm even worse, and then I found that I'm even worse, and then over time, a little bit, people started telling me that hey, there's actually some things around this that you seem to be doing actually quite well, and so that's a good. That's a good thing. But for me, definitely, I think I'm better as an engineer than a leader.
But you're leading quite a big engineering team as well, and Skype
Right.
was also a technical company. So
Right.
isn't that basically it's the leading role in the company in a sense? You're building an architecture, you're building the
It
whole
is, and
machine.
it is, and part of the reason actually that engineers follow me. Like if I'm the leader, somebody's following me. The part of the reason engineers are following me is that because they know and see that I'm a good engineer. Uh, so even though I'm not, I'm worse as a leader, they still follow me.
Do you remember the step when, well, I think it's called Peter principle, that you always almost like in your level of a maximum level of incompetence. So, if you're a good engineer and then, people in the company want to say, hey, you should actually now, become the team leader or, go higher in the ranking, and then you're not actually probably in your best position. So do you remember
Right. I have
your
this
journey?
experience of having been the CEO and then kind of stepping down to become the CTO and leading a smaller part of the organization. So, I was leading hundreds of people as the CEO, and now I'm leading just 100 people in the engineering organization in Starship. So I think I've actually seen this Peter's principle, firsthand also, and I think I've done the right thing of actually coming down. But also I would say, in Starship at least, people don't encourage in Starship, engineers to automatically become team lead. I would say some engineers want it, but it's because they want it, not because somebody tells them to do. It isn't the right thing to do for a lot of people. It is the right thing to do for some, and some people really have a good talent for it, essentially. But there are also some people that I think have this idea that I need to, okay, I've been in this job for X number of years, I need to progress, I need to become a team lead. It's not so automatic. It doesn't need to be like that. In Starship, as in many other companies, we also have this individual contributor career path or career ladder where you could be a junior engineer, mid-level engineer, senior engineer, principal engineer. So you could progress like that also. You can't, and we have only a couple of principal engineers in Starship. So you have a bunch of stuff to aspire to also without becoming a team lead.
So basically you can also get your compensation level going up without going to the management ladder, because sometimes it's like that you follow the money. You just
Right.
It's a natural thing in life, and if you just cannot do it in your engineering path, then
Right.
what do? Change company.
Right. Yeah, and then principal engineers, in Starship, make as much as in terms of money and compensation, as much as the best team leads, essentially. So it's certainly, and also I would say, a principal engineer is worth it to the company as much as a really good team lead. A principal engineer is worth more than an average team lead.
You mentioned also that you stepped down a bit, from being the CEO, and but then you also hired a COO who used to be a CEO, and you were the CEO. So how do you actually sort of constrain yourself of being the founder and the CEO? And now there's new person coming in, and it's
Yeah.
for both parties, it's sort of there's a tension, and it's a sort of natural tension coming from the different positions.
Right, and that was in Starship. That was I would say I would categorize this as one attempt or not attempt, but one way how we in one phase of the company, solved this sort of, let's say, like impossible equation of two founders trying to run a company with neither of them really wanting to be the CEOs. Was that I was the CEO, but I had a really experienced COO in the company, Alan Martinson, who I actually mentioned already earlier, and it's funny actually, his career up until that point was that he has been an entrepreneur and CEO all the time. Like I don't think he has done pretty much any other jobs or roles. Okay, he has been a VC as well, but all of the sort of, let's say, the roles in companies have been essentially CEO roles. He had never done anything else, I think. And I was the first time CEO, so all of my roles in the company was anything but the CEO role. And now then, I was the CEO in this company, and he was the COO. So we were both doing something that we had never done before. And then, but he was also, had been the CEO of different companies than Starship. So his experience, maybe it was very useful, but there was definitely this sort of creative conflict that I wanted to do things differently than he, as the CEO, would have wanted to. Or it wasn't like just automatic that he was the experienced CEO teaching me all the time, or maybe he was trying to, but I was not receptive, or I was not receptive enough, maybe. So I learned a lot through this creative tension. Definitely, it helped me a lot, and it helped Starship a lot. So during one phase of the life of the company, that's how we kind of maybe solved this or helped this a little bit, that I didn't want to be the CEO, that I had a COO that was actually taking care of a lot of things that I didn't know how to do, and who was helping me to do things. So yeah, it kind of, it's also a way that works. But if somebody would want, like, my advice would be to do it properly, to have a founder CEO
From the beginning.
From the beginning, yes.
So what is the minimum team to start a company, startup? How many people you need to the bare bone which actually functions?
Just one. I mean, the minimum is one, and you can use this resourcefulness. You have one resourceful person, and then you can use this person can use this resourcefulness to take care of everything else. Obviously they need to grow as well. Like I don't think it's really possible to build like a great startup with just one person. But initially it needs to be only one. And then it will grow. Or well, then this one person will grow it. It doesn't grow by itself.
Let's shift gears and go a little, unless there's something you want to mention about Starship. But I think there's been, there's actually one topic I would actually still want to just talk about Starship. And
Okay.
let's not go too deeply there, but the funding rounds, you mentioned already that you self-funded in the beginning, then you started to get the rounds. Is there any advice you can give to the people who are building their company, and now it's a tough situation also to get the funding? You obviously been doing a lot of investments yourself as well, seen and helping your friends around as well. So what's the take? Should you bootstrap? Should you take VC money? What are the mistakes? What are the obvious things which look like something but are completely different things?
Mm-hmm. I would say overall things that I have definitely learned also about the fundraising is that obviously your company needs to be performing well and however you characterize that, like I characterize that in terms of this metric or one metric or a number of different metrics. You can measure it in some, so you characterize that in other ways as well. But it's also that the view that the investors have of the company is actually very small, or it's like looking through the company like through a keyhole. Investors want to perceive that they understand everything about the company, or they know all of the important stuff. In reality, they don't. In reality, they are looking through a keyhole, and therefore it's very important that what is this? How are you characterizing the company? How are you positioning the company? What is the story that you are telling? Because investors in the end invest into a story and the company that matches the story. And you can actually, even though in your mind the story, there's just one obvious story, like I essentially during this podcast interview, I have, told the story of Starship, right? In a certain way, right? Maybe to an investor, I would actually tell the story differently. Or maybe an investor wants to hear the story differently, and it matters. It matters a lot. How are you telling the story? It's not obvious. It's not just one way to tell the story. You could tell that multiple ways, and it really matters. How are you doing this? And it's a very sort of creative process to think that, what's the story of this company?
How much should you take feedback from the investors? Because if you're bouncing, knocking on a lot of doors and you're getting different kind of advice every time you ask and say, okay, come later, yeah, this looks interesting. Oh, I don't believe in this, thing. I like drones. So whatever comes your way, should you?
I would say, especially the clients from investors, that investors who look at it and they decide they're not going to invest. You get a lot of feedback, but the feedback is just sometimes, it's like, oh, too early, or, we want to be more proof points of this, or, something like that. It's not really actionable for you. So you rarely get actually useful feedback from the clients. From some of the good investors, if you have good relationship with, sometimes they do. But in general, like I would say, take this with a grain of salt. Like anyone can say, it's too early. I mean, it's not useful really for you. Maybe it's accurate that they, for them, right? It's accurate, but they're doing it not to help you, but to explain their actions, to their own actions to you. But investors that have already invested in you, and they believe in you, and so forth, I would definitely recommend to have a very good collaboration there, and two-way information flow, and listen to what they say. It's also one thing that I think about advice in general. It's very easy to actually give good advice to people. If you're looking at it from the outside, you're seeing many things that the company itself doesn't see, for example, or doesn't put the right kind of attention to. It's easy to give advice to others. It's much harder to do it yourself. So I would give advice that listen to the advice of others.
I coined the term, borrowing a bit from you, like keyhole advice.
Well, yeah, keyhole advice is hard. Like if you have a very small view of the company, then it's hard to give like a good advice. But somebody who really knows you and the company a little bit more can give excellent advice. People who leave your company can also give you excellent advice.
How about the expectations when you doing your first round and then going to the succeeding rounds and sometimes a lot of alphabets following each other? Are there like steps that you cannot just copy paste your deck and do things the same way and that you notice that, okay, this is now a completely different ball game?
Exactly, absolutely, and the expectations go up. So when like I wouldn't actually necessarily say that that it was harder for us, for example, to fundraise our first round than it is right now, because the expectations go up at the same time. Back then, maybe in 2016, it was that, hey, can this really, work at all? And it was like a leap of faith that some investors, took that, hey, these guys are able to make this work. And, it's maybe a little bit easier to believe in a PowerPoint, or for some people, it's easier to believe in a PowerPoint. But then if you're raising like hundreds of millions and you already have done millions of deliveries, people are going to be looking at different things. They're going to be looking at your delivery numbers. And, is it growing? How fast is it growing? All of these things, they're looking at different things. And the bar goes higher as well if you're raising bigger amounts of money. So definitely, I would say capital raising is different. And I've also seen all through this process, what are the types of investors that invest 500,000, and what are the types of investors that invest 50 million or 100 million. It is different sort of people, and the experience level of these people is also different.
Yeah, and it's completely different expectation levels as well. Like we were talking about the deliveries. First, there's like one delivery. Maybe you can even tell the story, if you remember what was the first delivery, and then you're doubling. It's like, okay, 2 and 4, and it takes a long time to get anywhere basically. And in a similar manner that your valuation is maybe a few millions in the beginning, and then when you're in the billions, it's way harder to sometime double the number and get to that level, and then there becomes like a plateau, probably in some point. That
right. A lot of investors are just also asking for a valuation, and then they could see, oh, this is too high for us. We're not playing in this league.
By the way, do you remember the first delivery? Was it something which just happened, or was it like some kind of an event?
There were a lot of deliveries that we did in sort of this sort of extremely sort of testy way, where for example there was one delivery that me and Allan we were in Palo Alto, and we were driving a robot in Palo Alto. We were fully remotely driving at the time. There was not autonomous at all. And like we did like a bit of a mock delivery for some resident who just knocked on the door and said hey could we deliver something to you, and we asked for feedback, how did it feel getting something with the robot and so forth. But was it a real delivery? No, not really. Like we were not just knocking at somebody's door, right? I don't actually remember what was the first sort of commercial delivery where we really I don't remember actually, but it was by today's standards, it was very, very, very early days. But it must have been, 2016, 2017, 2016, yeah.
Well, was it in Tallinn or was it in US?
We were actually doing these sort of experiments and tests with various different companies in US, UK, Estonia, Germany. I don't remember which was the first one. But like I said also in the beginning that we knew that our robot could do loads of different kinds of deliveries. It could deliver packages, it could deliver food, it could deliver pizzas, groceries, flowers. So we did things like flower delivery before realizing that it's a much smaller market than some of the others. So it might be that the first delivery was a flower delivery.
Let's go back a bit of time. You mentioned that. You were 10 years old when you were learning to code, but the world was a bit different. Internet was somewhere in the ARPA's, central computers, and somebody has access to it. Maybe Bill Gates and a few other guys in the 70s had access to it if they were in the right high school, but most of the people did not. So, but you have another method. How did you learn to code, and do you remember the first program you did?
Right. I remember it actually very, very, very well. My parents were computer programmers. Both of them. They met at the workplace, right? So it was like very sort of software, parents essentially. And back then also interesting thing also that I'd say most of programmers were women at the time. So my mother taught me how to program computers, and a lot of their colleagues were also women. Like I would say, probably majority. And in fact, when I later, not when I was 10 years old, but later, actually told my parents that I've kind of chosen the profession as the software developer, then my mother actually her first reaction was actually that, hey, but that's such a woman's job. Like, maybe you could do something else, like a little bit like electronics or something like that. So electronics engineers were men, but the programmers were mostly women, at least in Soviet Estonia at the time. So now it's clearly, programmers software developers are mostly men, even though there are some great women in software development, and I would love to see more women in software development. Some of we have some really good women software engineers. But anyway, okay, let's go back to the time when I was 10 years old. My mother, it was my mother's idea that let's teach Ahti some programming. And at the time, we didn't have a computer at home. That was I'm born in 72, so I was 10 years old in 82. So at 82, it was essentially that in order to actually I've seen computers a lot because of my parents' jobs. Essentially, sometimes they needed also schedule some computer time and so forth, right? At work, to access a computer. At work also they didn't have like personal computers at the time at everybody's desk. So I'd seen computers at my parents' workplace. But when I was writing my first program together with my mother, then essentially I wrote it on paper, and then later when the program was ready, then we went to the computer at my mother's workplace and typed it in, and then actually could see how it would actually work.
Early on, you were also you found a bunch of friends, school friends and others, and then you established a company, Blue Moon. And what I actually found fascinating was that obviously you did a lot of things, and this is all in the website, and people can go and check, and I do recommend to check it out. So there was actually amazing stuff, but there was also the hardware component. Some of you were actually, physically doing hardware, computer stuff as well. So and you did also a bit complex stuff with the coding as well. Are there any particular memories, from those times? I think was it 89 when you more or less somewhat established the company, even though it was not registered at the time yet, and the Berlin Wall went down. So we are in Estonia. The Soviet times, it was a completely different experience. What Estonia looks like today. So. Is there something you want to sort of elaborate? I know it's been already discussed in some other podcasts, and I can put those into show notes already.
Definitely, this was the time where I was in it was the 80s, and I was in my teenage years. I was listening to Dingo and
that's a Finnish band.
And 50 Italy as well. This was also a Finnish, kind of music, TV program, and then essentially I like computers was cool, software was cool, I was trying to learn all sorts of programming that I could. I was doing, also everybody wanted to do like write their own computer game, and had tons of friends like that as well, who were interested in this area, and we were just we decided to together with a couple of friends to build a computer game, and not like a really simple one, but like a real computer game, and we were like 16 at the time or something like that, and for me this was purely as a hobby. I never thought that this would be like a business. So this was in
Hey, I have heard that before.
Yeah, and that was in Soviet Estonia. You couldn't really do business, in any case. Even though it was like perestroika was starting, and there was actually some commercial enterprise that was allowed in Soviet Union, and but one of my friends, Jan Tallinn, who's also now well known, he was my desk mate at high school, and he was part of the group, or we were doing this together, and he actually always, or not sure always, but he was the first one of us to actually have this ambition that we could actually sell this game that we are developing,
and I'm guessing it's Cosmonaut.
Yes, exactly. It was a sort of a PC game called Cosmonaut, and he had this idea we could actually sell this, and not not in like Soviet Estonia, but to abroad. So I never had that sort of. I didn't know how this works. He also didn't know how this works, but he at least he had this ambition or this idea or this drive that we could sell this, which I didn't have in when I was 16. And he had actually some contacts, and we actually managed to sell this first game while it was still in Soviet Estonia, and we managed to actually sell this to abroad, to Sweden, and we actually got, like, by our standards, a huge amount of money. By Soviet Estonia standards, a huge amount of money for it, which actually helped solidify our direction that hey, if we can make money with this, we can make good money with this, developing computer games.
And it was actually, wasn't it the first Estonian computer game published outside of Estonia?
Absolutely, but then also it was Soviet Estonia. Like, it wasn't an obvious thing to publish something outside Estonia. It was like this, still like this Iron Curtain and so forth. The Berlin Wall was still up and so forth.
By the way, as sort of a tidbit, was it 2 years ago, there was an Estonian computer game which became quite famous, Disco Elysium. It's a really good game. Yeah. And I recommend people to check it out if you haven't. So that's also coming, and it's also describing a little bit of weird times in a weird world, but it may actually somehow reflect on the Soviet realities as well.
Yeah, there's some good stuff done in Estonia for sure.
So for the next 10 years, more or less, you were having fun, studying, coding, doing different types of quite complex stuff as well. There was like real-time simulations, there were 3D graphics, impressive games. Also, you did like, I don't know, disk drives and drivers and banking software, if I recall correctly, this is all stated in your website. So there's like a lot of stuff you guys tested out and did on those days.
That is true. We also, during the 90s, also like economically, like, Estonia was starting with free market economy, right? And it was very much in the whole society. It was very much a time of experimentation for me. I was, like in my 20s, we didn't have, pretty much, none of us, most of us didn't have families. It was a time of experimentation, and you're finding the right path, in the world, and it wasn't so established as in maybe other places at the time, but also the other places were also much less developed than they are right now in terms of startups and software and so forth. So it wasn't like just an obvious that we didn't have like an ecosystem to plug into. We didn't have companies trying to hire us. We had to create these companies ourselves, and we had to create these products ourselves. And we did try a lot of different things. And for me as a software engineer, I have always been drawn to the complicated stuff, the technically complicated stuff. To just that also to push the limits of my own capabilities or utilize my capabilities. I've never I've never been specifically interested to do the simple stuff really well, but I've also understood over time, of course, that you also need to do the simple stuff. You need to do the boring stuff. You can't be just doing all the things just what you enjoy. This will just, in terms of business, will not get you anywhere really. Of course, you do something based on or because you love something, but in building every company, for example, there's loads of boring stuff that you don't want to do, but somebody has to do, and it's you who has to do it.
Was there this 250 times improvement moment during those years? Was there like impossible moments? I remember a bit later on, we can go there in a few minutes, but you needed to do PHP and you didn't know what it was and you learned it in the weekend, but that's probably in the level of 250, but was there something in those 10 years in a Blue Moon that was like a crazy challenging you still remember?
There were I think there were a lot of learnings that we had about about the business and how to run things. And we had a lot of learning experiences. Let's say it this way. And when I said that the first game that we sold to outside the Soviet Estonia, we made comparatively a lot of money with that. Then also the value of money, changed over time, or the meaning of money changed over time. So I think 5 years later, we didn't feel quite that we are making quite as much money. And we had a lot of things that didn't work out as well. But like I said, hey, we were all young, didn't have families and so forth. We could live with this. So now we are much more experienced. We do fewer mistakes, but also the bar is way higher. It's also that we actually need to make this or that work, and we can't afford that many that many failures. But this was the heyday of experimentation. We did loads of different things. We were talented enough to be able to pull off many things in software, all sorts of complicated things that we needed to do, that projects that we delivered successfully. And one example was this also that at some point we needed to learn PHP during the weekend, and it was at the level that on a Friday we didn't know what PHP was, like we just hadn't heard the acronym before.
And technically you couldn't Google because, or was it Google already existed at the time? I think it did.
I think
actually.
Alta Vista
it's probably the main one you did.
Time, but not Google.
Then things started to change. Well, I actually wanted just to comment that. So actually, this blooming period, you did a lot of experimentation as well, and it was obviously sort of hidden from the mainstream. But it's always been there that you've been testing a lot of things, and a lot of things are not working, but you learn from those. But it was also that there was people who actually got to work together, and these people became like key people in the next decade.
Right, absolutely, and I think it was hidden from the public because journalists are not interested in writing about this sort of experimentation, or these small teams that are doing these things. It's a little bit like the media is okay. There's this saying why big companies are often disrupted by startups, and why it is a surprise to big companies that now a startup took over our business. Essentially, it's essentially because big companies react to revenue threats, and the small company is not a revenue threat. It's like 0.01% of our revenue. So why pay attention to this until it isn't 0.0% anymore, right? Then it's too late. If something has a growth rate of 2x a year or 10x a year, it's a major threat, regardless of how small it is right now. Like the pandemic, we know now whole world knows what the exponential curve look like, right? And it's the same generally with general public that if somebody improves a metric, for example, in 1 month by 2x or 10x, it's something worth paying attention to. But people don't pay attention to that. People pay attention if the metric is big. Like if somebody has done 10 million deliveries or 1 million deliveries, then people pay attention. But if people double their amount of deliveries in 1 week, from like 100 to 200 or something like that in 1 week, people don't pay attention to that, but they should.
So the overnight success, which took like 10 years, which we already spoke about, is Skype, and there was an ad in the local newspaper, and your game was not exactly a success, so you didn't manage to actually sell it to anyone, so you needed a little bit of money, and then stuff started to happen. This has been told many times, but I think it's just good to just briefly recap, and I can put it to show notes, other places where you can hear the story more in elaborate way.
Right. So yeah, essentially when we were doing in the 90s, we were doing the computer games development, and at some point we exited computer games development and went into startups, essentially, and went into sort of internet-related software development. And the way that happened was actually our publisher in US went bankrupt. Our games publisher owed us money, and we were like, even though some of us actually had families at the time, so we actually found that we actually need money, quickly. And we realized that maybe doing computer games is not the best thing to do that. Maybe we should actually find something else. And then we actually noticed somebody at the time actually wanted to, and it was actually Niklas Zenström, actually, who was leading a company called Everyday.com at the time. Wasn't a startup, but doing a digital product essentially, and they needed a really good team of good software developers, like 2 people or something like that, to do like a bit of a rescue project or to a rescue project that wasn't going well, and they were
doing the impossible.
Exactly, and they were willing to pay very good money, for it. So we saw that ad, and we just thought that's exactly what we need. That's, somebody wants to pay us a lot of money. That's exactly what we need right now. We are like in debt a little bit, and we need a lot of money. The only problem was that we didn't know what this PHP was, so that's why we had to learn PHP over the weekend, and we won this job, and that's how we got acquainted to Niklas Zenström and Janus Fries. And then later on went on to do like Skype together and so forth. So that was actually my introduction to startups. And now I'm together with Janus again doing startup, doing Starship essentially.
Just a sidetrack, but just a curious one. Do you remember what was the first Estonian startup? What was you recognize as a startup? Because the boom was obviously happening already in the late 90s, and there was stuff happening in the 90s and even early on, but in Estonia it probably wasn't.
Yeah, it's a bit of a playing with terminology. What is a startup or not? Like Blue Moon a startup?
No.
Maybe, but not really. Like we were doing computer games, but it was like one game at a time, and every game, could be successful or not successful, and then we start doing the next game and so forth. We never like raised money from VCs, for example. In Estonia, the proper startup scene actually got kind of started with Skype or a little bit after Skype. There were some experiments before that as well, but really very, very little. And I think very much it's a very much also a case that if you have a society or a group, if you have a society or community which doesn't know that it can do startups, then they're not doing startups. Once somebody shows the first, hey, you can do it, then you have actually loads of people trying this. And Skype was actually instrumental in getting the Estonian startup scene kickstarted. Was Skype an Estonian startup? Okay, hard to say. So it's actually this funny thing you think about. Also Estonia is a very small country, obviously. So it's hard to build like a startup just completely in Estonia. But Skype was a startup where the largest office was Estonia. The product, the technical development was mostly or 100% in Estonia. The CEO lived in London. The founders were a Swede and a Dane. Investors were mostly from US. Customers were mostly from Asia, and the legal headquarters was Luxembourg. So, which is it? A Luxembourg startup? Yes, that's where legal headquarters is, but not really. Was it a UK startup? Maybe. Was it an Asian startup? Yeah, not really either, right? The nice thing is that all of these countries think Skype is their own, which is great. I like that people have the sense of ownership. But there were some, proper Estonian startups, then done later. And there's a little bit of a Skype mafia for sure, going on, not just in Estonia, but also in other places, also in UK and so forth. Like, like David Hinrikus, who founded Wise, he was like the kind of the first employee at Skype. So he was the first person who didn't get founder shares, essentially. I got founder shares. He didn't. He was like a couple of people later than me, essentially. And lots of others as well. And also, me, Jan, and a couple of other people then who also made money with Skype, we started investing that money in these early startups. I think back at the time, we kind of, probably lost most of that money, or definitely didn't get a high multiple in investment at the time, because the overall scene just was not that developed, and and we were maybe not as good as investors either. But it did kickstart to a large extent also the Estonian startup scene. Lots of people got either funded by us or inspired by us, inspired by Skype. And great things have happened.
Backtracking a bit, there's one point I just wanna maybe actually sort of stick out from your story, the Skype story, and that was that, and this goes back to the Starship as well. I will give you the clue in a moment, but you did peer-to-peer before Skype, the Gaza technology, and that obviously became once again really big. But my real point is that you had a business problem, I would say, which involved international calls. And what I learned was that you didn't actually realize that you already have sort of a technology, sort of like a similar way like Starship, that you're doing robotics, but here's like, hey, here's this amazing P2P technology we can use for international calls, and the world was completely different at the time, so you have to actually pay for your international calls, and you started in this case as well from the business side, not from the technology side, that okay, hey, we have this cool peer-to-peer technology and let's do something with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think if I also give advice to people, I would say actually starting from technology is a terrible idea. Like essentially it's a terrible thing to start developing solutions in search of problems. We very much try to first identify the problem, and then how can you solve it? And I think I've tried also this, developing solutions in search of problems before, but luckily, not anymore. I think.
We have not heard about those. Those are among the the startups you mentioned that never got too far.
Yes. I think so. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think engineers, and myself included, sometimes get hung up on the solution and try to develop this sort of great solution and so forth. And I would give advice to them to not do it too much, and I would give the advice to the non-engineers who get frustrated with that is actually part of the nature of the engineer to be developing solutions. So there's no need to blame them for trying to build solutions. It's maybe a little bit less of the engineer's job to learn more about the business and the problem. Their primary job is to develop a solution. So it's kind of natural.
Did you do the same kind of analysis on a napkin with the Skype when you started, or was you? Do you remember that? Was it actually like that? Hey, that's international calls and.
I think for me, there was a back of the napkin moment, but I'm not sure how important this moment. It was important for me, but I'm not sure how important it was actually in the founding of Skype. If I had this back of the napkin moment that I just looked at, like you said, at that time people were used to actually paying for international calls. Like if you just picked up the phone, well, it is like that as well, today, right? If you pick up your mobile phone and just call, like if I pick up the phone and call in New York, I need to pay for this. But if I use Skype or WhatsApp or something like that, then I won't. But I looked at just the price list of a telecom. Like if I pick up the phone and call New York, how much would I need to pay per minute? And then I calculated, okay, but how many bits of that audio? How many bits is that audio? And how if I now go to a telecom and ask for internet connection, and ask to transport bits to New York, how much does that cost? And I found out that there was 1,000 times difference. I would. As voice, I paid the telecom 1,000 times more to transfer the same information than, as transferring the same audio as bits, essentially. So that was, for me, a sort of important moment that, okay, voice over IP really makes sense.
And it was also the same if you think about text messages. They were really profitable for the telcos as well, because it was it the S7 or something, the protocol they were done for the infrastructure, and it was basically free thing for the telcos to send, which was invented just by accident or more or less. And you did the chat. So the Skype was also a chat, which was revolutionary as well. So it was not just audio, and probably when we now say Skype, we mean video, but there was no video in the beginning. It was just audio. And
Right. In the beginning, it was audio, then it was chat, and then it was video. And then also actually, one important thing about this was also that for the consumers or for the users of Skype, it was mostly the voice calls and then later video calls. But interesting thing, actually, Skype, since we were developing also a chat tool, right? We were probably the first or one of the first companies in the world that organized their internal life around a chat. Like right now, everybody uses, Slack and, some of these other things. But back then, companies didn't, because these tools didn't exist. But we were the company developing a tool like that. Internally, in Skype, the company was organized a lot around chats. And we really liked this. We really enjoyed this. We were all the first time doing this. Like, it wasn't that, people who joined Skype, they weren't, joining from these previous companies when they said, oh, we used Slack, back then. No, Slack didn't exist. They were like, oh, we used email. That's the background that people came from. And then they joined Skype, and then they discovered this new world of, actually doing internal chats. And we had all of the same things as people do nowadays, in Slack chats. And we were sort of the pioneers there in terms of how to organize the company life around chat.
there was also one fourth feature which I recall was really important, and that goes back to the Gaza. Wasn't there also file transfer? Because that was not obvious that you could actually, send thick files over email, because it didn't work. So it was difficult to send you something over the, if you're in another part of the world, and Skype was a way to do that as well.
Yeah, definitely. We built a lot of things into Skype.
Yeah, so it was actually an amazing thing for that generation of people who actually were in their early 20s in that time, and it changed a lot of lives, like you mentioned already. But Skype also changed a lot of lives and created like the unicorn moment in Estonia as well, that things are possible here, and it's not obvious that, well, I don't know, this is something maybe you can explain, that is it obvious that it was Estonia? Why it was not Latvia? Why it was not Lithuania? Why it was not some other places in the Eastern Europe? And what's so special about Skype? Because we have the highest density of unicorns now, and if you go back, a lot of these people are the Skype, early employees, or they were actually funded by the ambient sound investment, your investment vehicle with other co-founders, and you see familiar names like the Bolt co-founder Willik, and it's so, I don't know, has anybody actually counted that how many big startups actually has happened because of Skype?
Yeah, definitely quite a lot, and this Skype mafia definitely exists. That the people got energized by Skype, and they got funded by people who made money off Skype, and they got founded by people who had the experience from Skype. So it really, but Skype was like one of the biggest European success stories at the time. And especially for a country like Estonia, it's like Estonia is a small country, so having this sort of, kind of the biggest European success story kind of based in Estonia in some way. Okay, like I said, it was also based in Luxembourg and so forth, but also to a significant extent, Estonians felt that this was our own. And this was like number one success in Europe. So it's a big thing. It sends a big message to the society, to the entrepreneurs, to everybody who took part in Skype. Obviously, people also got a little bit, too heady, with this, I think everybody who was early at Skype when they went and founded another startup, their next startup failed. For
I
all
think
of
you
them.
mentioned that was it like the 10 first employees, was it almost every one of them did a startup and they all failed? There's something like that happened.
Exactly. David Hinrich was also did startups before Wise or between Skype and Wise, which failed. You know, I did a number of experiments which failed. You know, Martin Willig did something which failed. You know, so there's also an element of luck in a lot of the startups. Sometimes it's not that you're just good, or mostly it's not that you're just good and then everything you do turns to gold or starts working as a business. No, it's not like that.
And it was not the timing as well. But if you think about it, was probably in the later part of the 2000s. So obviously that was the financial crisis. But if you look back, Twitter, a lot of these names we know now were established along that times, and you already have connections as well. Hey, if you have a 2.6 billion exit in Europe, probably the people in the Silicon Valley are paying attention. So it's not that you're not connected. It's not that you don't have the means to do things. So it takes more.
Right, and absolutely. But you can still fail if you have all of these things.
And yeah, so that was like the next 10 years in your life, and well, you say that you probably are not going to do another startup. You mentioned that earlier on, but looking back at your history, I'm not so convinced. There's one topic let me ask and see whether you're interested of this one. Web3, because you've been going through the internet and open source and that different culture. It was a different culture at a different time, and sharing everything, Gaza and that type of thing. And now we have a similar decentralized peer-to-peer technologies coming again, but you haven't mentioned a word about those things. Do you have some ideas, or they now the hidden secret things you did do at the night, or you are not really interested, or it's not just the right time?
I would say I myself I'm not really interested, but that doesn't mean that other people are not. So there are a lot of things that happen in the world that I'm not interested in. I think they probably the main thing for me around this is that still there's a great promise that Web3 will kind of take over the world, and I don't know whether it does. And I'm not right now, I'm not the entrepreneur right now, willing to do this or bet on this. I think it could transform the world in a big way, but also might not. So and people confuse, a lot of people confuse the making money on the Bitcoin price that is going up and Web3 technologies. I think you can make money speculatively by investing in tulips all the time, essentially, without there being any sort of Web3 and for these people making money off Bitcoin, this crypto and decentralized is just a story, essentially. And I don't want to do things where I'm just making money off a story. Just off the story. The story also has to be there. But if I'm doing like a technical innovation, I would like to do it in a way that this technical innovation is actually instrumental in making this business work. And that's how it is with Starship. And I'm not sure whether that's the case in a lot of crypto investing right now.
Is there anything particular you want to point out? I'm just thinking the peer-to-peer, and because we want to get rid of the servers. Skype also started peer-to-peer, and then you had super nodes, and you went to the cloud because of the scale. So are we now in the curve of trying to decentralize and then we're centralizing again. Are there some technical challenges still which you see that are really interesting? If you are engineer
I think,
now, you should focus on.
At the time when we developed Skype and when I did when I and we and the group around me was the sort of the definitely the world leader in peer-to-peer technologies. At that time, running servers was really expensive. It was typical, for startups to require $1 million just to, buy servers.
Sun servers,
exactly, just to get started, essentially, just to offer like a basic service, not offer like a massive scale service, but just a basic service to buy $1 million worth of servers. That was sort of like a not unheard of, essentially. And we thought, okay, at that sort of, and with this sort of economics, if we want to run like a massive, for free, massive free calling service, that we want to have international calls for free, obviously we are not making a huge amount of revenue, or our unit economics need to be really good. And we figure we can't do that by, buying $1 million servers, essentially. We need to do some other technology. What has happened, guess what, in these 20 years is actually that it no longer takes $1 million. So I would say the same premise doesn't exist anymore. Now people are doing the Web3 actually for different reasons. And fundamentally, whether that works is, I think, decided by, do people want to really transform the world in this way? And it's sort of the customers that need to adopt. And let's see whether they do.
You're not just doing technology, you also been part of another movement which started from Estonia, which was unique and became a worldwide thing. Can you already guess what I'm?
I can guess what you
Go
mean.
ahead.
So you mean the cleanup?
Yeah. So let's do it. Started 2008, and there was 50,000 people involved. So it was like 4% of the whole population did something. If you want to just explain what it was and what was the impact and
right, this was I'm actually involved in a number of sort of not-for-profit initiatives as well. I'm not just about doing startups and raising rounds of funding and so forth. I actually donate to NGOs also quite a lot. And one thing that I was involved with was about cleaning garbage, out from the world, and mainly the countryside. It's a little bit, maybe it's a little bit uniquely sort of, not uniquely Estonian, but a little bit uniquely Eastern European thing that after the Soviet times, the Soviet Union there was a lot of garbage, I would say. And in general, it was a very sort of non-ownership taking environment where people littered a lot. Not necessarily in the cities, but to get rid of garbage, some people just went to the forest and just threw everything in the forest in a random place. So and it's also, Eastern Europe and Estonia also, they're not very populated countries, so it's easy to actually find a place where nobody sees, where you dump a truckload of garbage. There were a lot of these places in Estonia, and there was this group of people that I was part of. I wasn't leading this, but I was kind of part of the group. To decide that, okay, let's do like a bit of a crowdsourced or citizen movement to clean this up, and we had this idea, or I didn't have that idea, but other people had this idea that let's actually galvanize the public around cleaning this up in one day. So let's organize this one date, and we had like huge number of people, like tens of thousands of people or more, to have it at least like one sort of like cleanup festival or type of event, and and we organized that. We did that. That was about 3% of the population of Estonia. The president was cleaning and so forth. It was a huge movement that has now been repeated in tens or more than 100 countries with many millions of people. So that has been a very successful movement. I was part of that especially in the beginning. There was actually there was actually quite significant amount of technology in there, because one key part there was actually to show people the problem. We developed a garbage map where we actually mapped the garbage beforehand. It's much easier to put it on a pin on a map than to go and clean this up. To clean this up takes hours. Put the pin on the map and just go on to the map the next point. It takes very little time. So we first actually pre-mapped everything. So we knew approximately how many tons of garbage do we have, how many people do we need, and we showed that also to the public. We published this map. Everybody could go and click around, around my home, what garbage there is, and people then realized, oh, there's actually some really bad stuff out there. Let's go and clean this up. And I built that map. I built that logistics. I built that mapping technology, so to speak. It was very simple. It wasn't anything too complicated.
Yeah, Google Maps, I guess, existed already at the time. So
yes, yeah.
But it was it was a huge thing, and then it was 2018. 10 years later, then there was a World Cleanup Day as well. So it was like let's clean up, and this is the thing in the you don't call nowadays developing world, but in the countries which are still having a bit of that attitude that let's throw things away, and you just cannot say to people that just pick up
right.
the trash.
I must say that there was this attitude earlier that let's just throw things away in the forest. But I must say there was also in these countries, and also in Estonia and also in Eastern Europe, there was a huge attitude to let's clean this up. And actually in the more developed countries, we didn't find that attitude. There was still a garbage, but there also wasn't an attitude that let's organize to clean this up. It was more that, oh, hey, the government will do that. Well, yes, maybe, but you can say that, oh, people in Eastern Europe had this attitude of throwing things in the forest. That's true, but they also had the attitude of cleaning up, which actually didn't exist. I mean, we actually had much harder time, making this work, like in Germany, for example. In Germany, people didn't want to do the cleanup, because they thought, oh, the government should clean this up. There's also garbage in Germany. Don't get me wrong, there is.
Yeah, and usually what I recall as well was that it's considered other people's problem. Like I don't need to do it. It's either the government or I'm too highly paid. It's somebody else's low-paid person's job to do it. I don't need to do that. And it's really hard to change that. But if you do the division of labor, it's easy to map that hey, there are garbage there, and then probably you can rally people around, and the social signaling starts to work. So that was probably part of the innovation as well, that seeing and showing that it's not just the kid's job or it's not just somebody else's job, but even if the CEO of the company is doing it, probably I need to do something as well.
Yeah. In fact, actually, we wanted to specifically, our goal was not just, sort of clinically, technically clean the garbage. What's the easiest way to just clean the garbage? You actually map it, you hire a professional team of garbage cleaners who are professionals. They do it, quickly. Then you buy tools for them, and you get it done with, 100 people or something like that. The problem is then these 100 people maybe take ownership of this garbage and for their environment and so forth. But even they are not really doing this. They're doing it as a job. They're getting paid, right? But we specifically selected a method of involving a lot of people who then everybody took ownership of the land in a way, like not legal ownership of the land, but, so that the mental ownership of our environment. That's what we needed to do, essentially. And that's what why we selected the most inefficient way to do it, that you work on something for 3 hours, so you're just getting up to speed when it's actually over. So we needed a lot of people. That's why we by design, we thought that, okay, maybe we could galvanize 3% of the population. That's what we did.
You've been part of some restoration and other projects as well. Is there something you want to mention, your interest in this area?
I think there's a lot of things that I am interested in, but I think there's a lot of things we could talk about, but maybe not.
What is your favorite word?
My favorite word. I don't have a favorite word. I think I have a least favorite word, but not a favorite word.
Well, what is your least favorite word?
I think the one thing that irritates me nowadays is this word called guarantee. The especially if we read about like government and politics, there's all sorts of politicians who want to guarantee things to the population. But I don't think anyone in today's volatile world can really guarantee anything. I think if you look at just history, then even one of the most powerful countries in the world, like the United States, has not been able to guarantee the safety of their president because at least one of them has been shot. So nowadays, if I hear politicians or companies saying that they guarantee this or that thing, I just a little bit like I'm not in this world. Everything has a failure rate. There's a percentage of time something doesn't work. Maybe this is just my pet peeve as an engineer.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Yeah. So freedom, nature. I do a lot of hiking. Hiking combines two things: nature and freedom. Like I can see, in the mountains or in the north of Sweden or Finland, or I can see. Oh, I want to go on top of this mountain, or I want to see what's behind this, and I get this physical exercise. I get to be in nature. That charges me up emotionally for sure, and my family as well.
What turns you off?
Bad communication with people, like bad communication in the sense that people being angry with each other for no reason, people having expectations that I should deliver something to them that I never promised, or things like that. And I think there's a lot of frustration in the world, nowadays, which is a bad thing. This turns me off.
What is your favorite curse word?
I don't even have one. For some reason I know a lot of Finnish curse words. Uh, uh,
Was the
but
TV so bad that they were only cursing at the time?
no, not really. But I know a few Finnish curse words, but I don't really use them. I use them to make fun of Finnish people, but not really. I'm not much of a cursing person.
What sound or noise do you love?
Probably birds singing. That I love that.
What sound or noise do you hate?
People arguing or being angry.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
It would be really okay. Okay, that's not a okay. It's not really a profession, I guess, but to some extent, it would be interesting to actually, very systematically be like an athlete, or develop yourself physically. Like I was, at school and so forth. I always got like bad grades in physical education, or I wasn't really good at that. And but part of the reason also was that I think at the time I didn't even realize that you can actually develop yourself physically. Really, like if you train at something, you do get better. That's actually something that I learned just an adult. At some point, decided that okay, I will try, like running or jogging. So I started doing that. I realized that I actually develop. That I'm not good at that. I think, but I'm probably at my age, I'm better than the average person at my age. I think and that is just that I've worked to develop myself. I've worked. I like physical exercise actually. I'm not doing too much of it, but I like it. I enjoy it. I would actually love to some extent, maybe sometime take like a year or something like that, where suppose I don't like work, but I do systematically develop myself physically. That would be interesting. It would be fun. It would feel different.
Listeners, take notice that probably is the next $10 billion company coming.
I don't think so.
What profession would you not like to do?
I don't like doing like completely manual, repetitive things. So I think there are many professions like that I wouldn't like to do.
If you could be a co-founder of any startup in any era, which one would you choose?
I'm definitely fascinated by a lot of deep tech things like space. The number of interesting space startups nowadays. I think these are exciting. I'm not sure whether this is really for me. I don't really have a lot of the background and now I'm doing a robotics startup which has a name Starship, but it's not actually flying to space
yet. Any final words to the audience?
I think you don't. I think I've done some interesting things, and I know that you are also doing some interesting things. My word to you is that also come to Petri's podcast and tell me about interesting things that you are doing.
Thank you, Ahti. This has been an amazing talk. There's so many insights. It has been such a pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and till next time.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Petri, for inviting me.